Got worms? Hey guys, so it's getting about time that everybody wants to go fishing. Bait is getting hard to find, so I'm going to show you how to make my home worm setup. I'm going to show you one I did just a few minutes ago from my mother, and then we're going to look at one I have at my house, and you'll see a difference, and so you'll see how it gets started, and then you'll see how it finishes up. Okay, so I'm at my mother. She wanted a worm bed, and this is some starter worms. This is some type of soy sauce bucket that she got that a lid does not fit on for some reason. I've got a bag of leaves from my house, a drill, some starter worms, and then we got a lid for this bucket. I'm going to show you my setup, how we do this. Using the smallest drill bit I can get, I'm just poking in some holes real quick into the lid. You can't see them that well, but I've got one there, I've got one there, one there, one over there, there, and there. There's no rhyme or reason, you just have to have a few air holes, and there's one over there. So that's that for this portion. Opened the bucket and it had this marketing manager's card in it, and I was thinking to myself, if you really wanted me to use you, give me a free bucket. Don't make me pay $9 for a freaking bucket and lid. But be that as it may, now we're going to poke some holes in the bottom of this bucket. I'll show you that. With the bucket turned upside down, we're going to do what we did with the lid and use the same drill bit and just poke some holes here. You need more holes in the bottom because these are drain holes. So I'm going to continue doing this. We'll go from there. It's hard to see, but those are peppered with holes. I'll try to, you can see little holes all in there. So now for the next step. Now we're probably going to use the finest application for a newspaper I know to line something with. So I'm just poking this down. Really the only reason why I even look at a newspaper is for a liner. So there we go. Now we'll add in our leaves. Alright, so with the leaves added, I'm going to go ahead and wet these down, get them wet, because these are kind of dry still. I'm seeing a lot of dry stuff, so I'm going to try to get this wet down a little bit, but not too much. There's some of the worms at the top. These are European night crawlers. I find them to be probably the most, I say, the most beneficial for people that don't know how to do a worm bed or don't have time to devote. These are the easiest to get started and most resilient I have found. I'm just dumping this in. See, there's a bunch of them there just crawling around. Okay, so that stuff that I tossed on top with the worms, that already had food with it and their bedding. So there was some base bedding from the colony I have at my house, and so that right there, that will go through the leaves. They'll work their way through the leaves, but I want them to feed on the top first before they get to the leaves. It'll take them a while to eat this much food, and I just want to start making cocoons and making more babies. So what I'm going to do now is put some paper on top. If you hear a helicopter, we have military bases around here, as you know. That is the sound of freedom. And I'm just going to cover this with newspaper just to keep any moisture in the container here. It won't keep the escapees out, but you don't get a lot of escapees with European night crawlers. Now we just put the lid on there and go from there. Oh, by the way, these new lids, you always have to take the edge off of it for them to sit, so just remember that. Now it'll seat properly. Make sure it clicks into place, because Lord knows you don't want to have a bad seat on it. I'm going to use both hands here. Now that it's all clicked, this goes into the other bucket. Now I didn't do anything to the bottom. So what you have here is just something to catch the water. Do not think that that is worm tea. That is leach water. That is water that has drained and it's not the right pH. It doesn't have the right nutrients. Do not use that water for gardening. That is to be thrown away. If worms escape, get them out of it as quickly as possible and back into the bucket. I get a few worms that might escape, but really the only time I've ever had escapees is when I was using red wigglers. Red wigglers love to escape. They love to roam. European night crawlers, they're so temperamental, or they're so got even temperament. They're not temperamental at all. They got even temperament, and so they make the best all-around worm for most zones in America. They cannot stand freezing temperatures, and they cannot stand really, really hot temperatures. So you gotta keep them in a shaded, protected area. But as long as you got some area that you can keep the pests away, that's the biggest problem with these systems. You got to have some type of ant poison or something other around, and you need to make sure that the holes are small enough that nothing can get in that's big. Most ants, they still can get into that size hole, but if you got ant poison around it, you're fine. No other bugs normally get in there that would harm the worms. You'll get some mites. Everybody gets upset about mites. Mites help break down the bed so the worms can eat it. So all these people get upset about mites. If you watch, these are YouTubers that normally are selling castings, selling worms. These are not worms for sale. These are for fishing and for using in the garden. So what mom can do now is when she's ready to harvest castings, she can stop feeding them for a while and then pour the bucket out into a container, get out the worms, get out the cocoons, leave some behind, because you always have to have some of your bedding because it has all the microbes that your worms need. So if you buy worms and it doesn't come with bedding, that worm grower is doing you a disservice. You need some of the bedding to actually start your colony, because you don't want to put them into a bedding media with no inoculant in it. So you save some of that behind, you take out all the cocoons and worms that you can get, and then you just use the castings. It takes about 6 months to a year to get castings out of a bucket situation like this. And then, of course, every 90 days they're going to double. So that's important. Right now it's about ideal weather for the worms to be mating, and so these are juvenile worms. They're about to become adults, and so that will get her started off right. Okay, so this right here is my bucket, and we'll take a look at it. Now, I routinely feed my worms varying diet. So I've got some oatmeal, I've got some tops off some carrots I grew, and I put eggshells in here. So it gets a varied diet. I do a mixture of slow and fast foods. But let's This right here is some cornmeal that I threw in a little while ago. They haven't ate it all yet, but I'll break this up. Sometimes it's just too dry and too much, and so you have to come break it up, but most time they'll work their way through it. I've got babies in here, so you can see that little baby right there, and then some older ones right there. Most of these are juveniles. The weather is warming up, and so the adults will start mating soon. So you're not going to see many cocoons in here, I don't suspect. I'm not seeing any right now. But there's some more worms. It's just loaded down. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour these out so you can see what they look like. Before that, I wanted to show you this water. This is that leach water I told you about. And what I did is I took some plastic, some of this plastic bin stuff. I had one I was about to throw away. I cut it, heated it, and put a clamp on it, and then it just fits over this so that it doesn't create a suction. But what I'm going to do is pour that out. You don't want that water at all. That is not got any benefits to it whatsoever. And let's use this bin here to pour the worms out. Now, I have not dug in this well, all winter long, and so this right here is hard and compacted. There might be a few worms in here, but most of them are staying at the top, and so I'm gonna have to break. There's one right there. Well, there was one. He already escaped somewhere. But I'm gonna dig down, get this broken up, and get all into a container so you can kind of see what's happening. Okay, now these are bigger holes than I'd like to have. When I did this one, I went with bigger holes, thinking that'd be better, and it's not. Go with smaller holes. Now all this right here has compacted, and they have not been able to get down to it and eat it up like they need to. So what I'm going to do is stir these up and get them mixed in. This is not, like I said, this hasn't been touched. This hasn't been touched in, I would say, probably 4 months or so. And so I've got all these worms there on the bottom here that was actually the top of the bucket, and basically bottom of the bucket's now on top. So what I'm doing is I'm going to stir these up and show you that. You know, once it's stirred up, I'm going to break this up and get this piece of bread that they've been eating. And you can tell these are juveniles. All right, they don't have the little egg sac yet that will be forming. So you can see the difference. There's a few adults, but most of these hatched out. We had a big freeze and it killed a lot of stuff. So these were babies that hatched out. So I'm not expecting to find many adults yet. I'm finding juveniles that are about ready to turn into breeding adults in the next month. Alright, so I've got one breeder right here, and you can tell, see that swollen area right there? That's what they use for making the eggs that they form into cocoons. So this guy right here is a breeder, but he has to, and it's probably his first time or its first time breeding, and it's got to find another one that's at this stage to breed with, or else it can't breed. Even though worms have both sexes, they have to have another worm to reproduce, and it's got to be the worm of its kind. So I'm gonna look around and see if we can't find another one real quick, but there's no cocoons in here so far. Now this one right here is not ready yet, but you can see that it's starting to form that little egg sac there. So it's getting to that stage. I'll put it over here with that other. Now what are the benefits of doing this? Because obviously I have this outside. It's in one container. I'm not doing like these professional guys on YouTube where I'm always in the bins. Like I said, I haven't done anything. This is a potato I put in just yesterday that was frozen. If you want your potatoes to be eaten quickly, you can see this one's burrowing in. What you do is you freeze it, and then it's fast food for the worms. So this one is starting to eat into it. I'm going to leave this over here for it. But what's the benefit of doing something like this? I mean, why would I want to do this? Well, simply put, and there's a breeder right there, a new breeder. This is a way of doing worms just for private use. I'm not selling these worms. These worms right here came out of a bait can that I bought at Walmart. These are the best worms. They're the most temperamental. They're the most forgiving out of all of them. There's another worm there. I'm trying to break up this food that they're in. This is cornmeal. But what it is that they'll eat through everything, but you gotta fluff up the bedding a little bit every once in a while. It's just not been, I try to leave them alone during the winter. And these got so cold that the adults died. And so I had no breeders. They will not breed once the temperature gets below 65. They prefer 75 degrees. That's the optimal temperature that a worm needs to breed. And so they do not have optimal temperatures in the wintertime outside. And so they wouldn't have bred anyway. But the cocoons that I had already in here, they hatched. And so this is clump, just got a ton of them in here. You can see that there. Look at them all in there. But they're getting to all that food. But and that's tea and stuff like that. Tea grind. They love tea. They love tea and coffee. And they love cornmeal. They really love cornmeal. But anyway, this allows you to just have a constant supply of worms. And so what I'll do now that it's warming up, and these are starting to become breeders. That's a breeder right there. You can see that. I'll put the name of the actual, I think it's called patella, something like that. I'll put that on this video here. But these worms, this bread, they love bread, grains. I just kind of let them do their own thing. With cocoons in the ground or in the bedding, they will hatch out when the temperature's right and start fattening up. So even if I do have a bad freeze, this is nature's built-in way of keeping the bed going, keeping the colony going. So we had Arctic blast. I had a lot of things die. These were out in the Arctic blast. I tried to protect them best I could, but I wasn't going to put them in my bedroom. And this is Florida. We don't have basements. So, yeah, they have to do whatever. So what I've done is I've got the bedding mixed up now. There's food spread throughout. There's grit spread throughout. There is what we call fast food, which is like this bread that is just soaking wet. They'll eat that. The slow food, little stems of carrots, where I had some carrots growing this winter. So I've got a mixture, and then there's a bunch of gritty stuff in here, mainly from crushed up eggshells. I've got gypsum in here. They've done research and found out that if you put gypsum in your worm bed from time to time, you'll have bigger worms, healthier worms. I learned that from Tolga. I'll put a link down below. He's from Dubai. This guy, he's getting started in worm farming, and already he is years ahead of a lot of people because he knows a lot about food science and he's willing to study. And that man knows a lot. He's He's doing it more like a professional worm farmer. This is just backwoods at-home worm raising. This is how you can do it very easily at your house. You do not have to have a ton of bins at your house like they show on these YouTube channels. Those guys mostly are either in climates where they can't, have them outside. I live in Florida. Take that into consideration. It doesn't snow here. Or they're selling them. A lot of them are selling them. So, what I'm going to do now, like I said, watch Toga. And then Ricky Wallace, I'll put a link down below to his channel. He's doing a bin that's a different setup than what I have. His is going to be more the old school type. So definitely watch him as he does his worm bed, because he'll show you a different way of doing a worm bed for outside. Again, realize he's also in Florida. We live in the same city, same area of Florida. So definitely take that in consideration. It rains. Toga, he lives in Dubai. It's very dry. Some of these other worm farmers, they live in Indiana and places like that. So take into consideration where you live as to how you should proceed. But I've got all these mixed in now, and they're evenly dispersed. The food is evenly dispersed. I'm going to lay a layer of dry leaves in the bottom, and then I'm going to start filling my bucket. Okay, so that is roughly about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of dry leaves. Now we'll just take handfuls of this bedding media with the worms in it and just start kind of fluffing it out a little bit and letting it get some air in there. A lot of worm growers talk about anaerobic environments. Your worms, they don't really like anaerobic environments. Moreover, as you can tell, the area that was compacted, they didn't want to go into. They wanted to be where it was nice and airy. So you can see where I just left it through the winter and hadn't touched it. They was in the areas where I'd fluffed it up. And so that is something that I'll be doing more often now that it's warmer, is I'll be fluffing this up and also evenly dispersing the worms so that they can get to this food, because they're not, the stuff in the bottom wasn't broke down because the worms weren't down there to eat it. I want to make sure that this is all good and well eaten. At this stage, it's going to take them probably until the summer to finish all this up, and then that will be the bedding matter for my gardens. But you can just see it's loaded, handfuls after handfuls after handfuls, just nothing but worms. And this is just still stuff that I've tried to break up, and they're in that, it's all cornmeal, and they're just in that stone ground cornmeal. Oats, they love oats more. They really, they ate the oats before they ate the cornmeal. I got a little bit of cornmeal left, but they tore through that oats first, and it's nutrient dense. Before you feed them, always take some eggshells. What I do is, we have chorizo con huevos a lot. We have it at least once a week at my house. And so that requires, for Tasha and I, roughly anywhere from 9 to 12 eggs. And we'll take the eggshells and put them on a sheet tray and bake them just for a little bit, not long, not until they're brown or anything, just to heat them through, to kill off anything and to denature the proteins. And then I'll take a mortar and pestle. If you have a good blender, you could use a blender. I do things the hard way sometimes. And that's just a piece of carrot top right there. But anyway, what I do is I'll take the eggshells, grind them up into a powder, and then I'll put a few tablespoons of the eggshell with the food. The reason why you want to do that, the bacteria will break down food and make it acidic, and the worms will also change the pH. And so this allows for the pH to be better balanced. Also, you wouldn't think it, but what do you think a worm and a bird have in common? They both have gizzards. And then mullet and I believe sturgeon, which I think those are the only two fish species in this area that also have a gizzard. So they need grit. And so that eggshell gives them a little grit as well. So I'm going to continue putting this in here, and we'll fill up the rest of this bucket, and I'll be back in a minute. Alright, as you can see here, I still have more bedding than I've got bucket. My bucket is overflowing right here. So what we're going to do is something special. I don't want to compact these, so what I'm going to do is let these level them out, and I'm going to lid this. And anything that I don't think will be breeding soon, I'm probably going to take out of this mix so that I can put the lid on. Alright, so this goes back on top of here like that. This right here is just a tote that I've been growing some plants in. I want to get some radishes in pretty soon, but I've got to break down all these leaves and material. I've put some worms in here in the past. There might be some in here as we dig, but not many. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take and add the bedding and some of the worms in here to hopefully get this broken down some more and let these worms kind of dig in better. So that's going to be the next thing we do. So here we have it. There's some worms. You can see a worm there, worm there. Actually, that's a pretty good breeder, or about to be a breeder worm. So the idea is that if I can get a healthy colony in here going, that this will be a bed that I can continually break down stuff in here. So it'll probably be a good, I would say, month and a half. But you can see all these baby worms in here that, you know, they're going to be mixed in with this leaf matter down below. And I'm going to fluff this up a little bit better and let them eat through all these. Like, this is the carrot scraps because I didn't have any more room. So this will be like a secondary worm bed slash composting bin slash God knows what else, because I never can do anything like everybody else. Always got to be contrarian. So we're going to mix this in good, level it out, and that will be their new home. Alright, so it's all leveled out, ready to go. Just remember, my videos are always not a how-to do. They're a how I do. I'm just a normal guy with varied interests, and I show you how I do things. I don't want to raise worms for profit. I just want to raise enough that I put them in my little garden area. I can, you know, I can go fishing with them, give some to some friends. That's it. I'm not trying to make a profit. So this was a way that you can do it at home. It's simple, it's easy. Like with the extras, they went into a container garden. And they're going to be making compost, basically. They're going to be breaking down the material I put in there, and then I'll eventually put some radishes in there and get them growing, because we do not have a big tract of land that I can garden. The land we do have is shady most of the places because it costs a fortune to cut down all the trees. So I have a little bit of light, I have a little bit of area I can work with. Like most people, space is at a premium. So I don't want a big giant section for gardening. I don't want a big giant section for worm raising. I want something that's easy and manageable, so in between mediations I can run out, I can mess with my worms a little bit, give them a little food, fluff them up, and then when I'm ready to go fishing, grab me some worms and go fishing. And if we have a big freeze, I don't want to have to worry about, oh, am I losing thousands of dollars? No, I'll run to Walmart and get some more if they all die. But as you could tell, the freeze killed the adults. There's no doubt in my mind the adults died from the freeze. But the babies, the cocoons that hatched out, they're ready to go. So that shows you how a thriving, diverse colony can make a comeback. So just try it. You don't have to do everything that I do, but if you think it would work, this is just a way to consider it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please comment if you raised worms before. Let me know if you tried something like I've done or if you do something different. Like I said, I'll give links down below for Tolga and for Ricky. There's some other good worm channels. Just realize that most of them doing the bins, they're doing it for purposes involving profit or something else in mind. This is not for profit. This is everyday home use. This is as simple can be, where you're not doing stuff all the time to it like they're doing, because they got to do it for money. They got to do it for the health of their colony. Me, I'm just doing it because I want some worms. That's it. Alright, so with that, please subscribe if you hadn't already, and I will see you again next time. Bye.